You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. My guests today include Leslee Udwin, returning to the program. She is the documentary filmmaker of India's Daughter. When she was last on the program, the film was not available in the United States. Now it is, and she's returning to talk about that and a very interesting spin-off project. Also with us is Lorie Mertes, who is the Director of Public Programs at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, on a wonderful new public program they're initiating. And last with us is law professor Marianne Franks to tell us what revenge porn really is. You have no idea. I want to remind you, if you haven't looked at it already, that my TED Talk has been posted. All you do is go to TED.com, TED, like teddy bear, put my name into the search engine, and up it comes. It's already had, astonishingly enough, 500,000 full views. Wow. And it's poetry yet. So we'll get to the guests in just a moment, but first we need to look inside the headlines. Buried way inside the headlines, because it actually was women listing our primary concerns, was a new study just released from the Thomson Reuters Foundation with support from the Rockefeller Foundation. And it's about what women considered their 5 top issues, women working in the G20 countries. You will remember that G20 stands for the Group of 20. And the Group of 20 is an informal group of 19 countries plus the European Union with representatives of the IMF and the World Bank. And it's a matter of international economic cooperation. It's the premier forum for that and for decision-making that affects communication among these countries. So G20, Group of 20 leaders, meet annually, and this study was about women working in the G20 countries. And it's very, very interesting. They surveyed more than 9,500 women in those 19 nations, uncovering the 5 biggest challenges faced by women at work. So this is labor force. The survey found that 44% of the women questioned identified work-life balance as their top concern. Receiving equal pay to men doing the same job was the second biggest concern at 39%, followed by a lack of flexible working hours at 32%, and then followed by having access to the same career opportunities as men, 31%, and being sexually harassed, 27%. The breakdown by countries is interesting, too. Just some examples. Work-life balance is ranked as the top concern in Russia and in 4 of the 5 Asian G20 countries, South Korea, India, China, and Japan, where women mostly quote cultural expectations and the lack of flexible working hours as some of the main ongoing issues. Women in South Africa and Mexico express the least concern about work-life balance. The report reveals that 4 in every 10 women see the gender pay gap as the key issue, with 7 nations listing this as the major challenge for women. France, Germany, and the U.S. lead the table of countries where women are concerned the most about inequality of pay. This is despite recent World Economic Forum data that indicates these economies have, in fact, some of the narrowest pay gaps among the G20 nations. Women in Britain, Australia, Brazil, and Canada also rank the gender pay gap as their biggest workplace worry, while in China, women expressed the least concern. Harassment was flagged by women in Turkey, Mexico, and Argentina as their key challenge at work, and was identified by 29% of women overall as a major concern. Nearly 1/3 of women in the poll admit to having experienced harassment, although more than 60% do not report it. Indian women are the most likely to speak up. This is a change of attitude since the fatal attack of a female student on a bus in Delhi in 2012, the incident which sparked widespread protests. The poll is also interesting because it shows that there are expectations through policy and practice that are not being met. But the idea that women are expecting more is a good sign. Younger women, the so-called millennial generation, are more upbeat than older colleagues. The survey finds 40% of women aged under 35 believe that they have the same chance of success as men in having their own business, compared to 33% of women aged 50 to 64. That either means things are getting better, or that younger women are naive and haven't been hit hard yet, but they are more optimistic. And it would be good for everybody, folks. A recent report from McKinsey Global Institute, published earlier in October, shows that, get this, tackling workplace inequality could boost the global economy by 12 trillion, that's with a T, trillion, over the next 10 years. And now it's time for my first guest. Leslee Udwin, the director of the documentary film India's Daughter, was a guest on this program last spring when the film had just been banned in India and it was not yet available in the United States. Now it is available in the United States. It's just opened in theaters here and will be playing for some time. And she's returning to the program to tell us about that and about a remarkable initiative that has been spawned from the film. Here is Leslee Udwin. Leslee Udwin. Leslee, welcome back to Women's Media Center Live. It's good to have you back again.
I'm so thrilled to be back. Thank you.
Well, I think we spoke earlier this year, last spring, but the film India's Daughter was not yet available in the United States, and it was still busily being banned in India, appallingly enough. And now it is available in the United States. It opened just yesterday in New York City. It's going to L.A. Start by telling us what its opening schedules are and where people can find it.
Sure. So it did open last night, well, yesterday, in fact, at the Village East Cinema in New York. This coming Friday, it opens in the Sundance Sunset Theater in Los Angeles. And these cinemas have 5 screenings a day, so there is plenty opportunity for people to see this powerful tool for change and crucially important film. And I'm happy to tell you that we have an independent cinema chain is now going to be showing the film in various cinemas across the country. So please, everyone, be on the lookout for it.
Many new listeners have joined us since you last were on the program, so we should do a little bit of 101 here. India's Daughter, which Leslee conceived, created, and directed as a documentary, is the story of Jyoti Singh, who was a young woman studying medicine in India from a poor family, who went with a male friend to see The Life of Pi, hardly what you'd call a glamorous, inciting evening, in Delhi, and who they got on a bus on the way home, and the bus was in the control of a group of youths who then beat him up and gang raped her so severely that ultimately she died. Gang raped her and massacred her internal organs. So the entire world rose up, because starting with Indian young women, feminists, who took to the streets, joined by young men and students, and then unions, and then hundreds of thousands of people. India never does anything in small numbers, took to the streets, and all of that is in the film, and then it took fire around the world, and there were demonstrations in New York, in fact, and other cities. But what the film goes into is, and what got you in trouble, Leslee, was that in interviews where no director had gone before. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, Robin, it seemed to me that in order to change these men who violate the human rights of women and girls, we need to understand them. And so it was an absolute imperative for me to interview those rapists, the rapists in this particular case. I needed to know what kind of a human being can gang rape a young woman and end up after the gang rape pulling her intestines out of her body.
Yeah.
I needed to understand what has gone to forming these men's minds and attitudes towards women. And so I wrote the most impassioned letter I've ever written and spent a week perfecting it because I had to get the answer yes to it. And I sent it to the director of prisons, Delhi, and she was a woman, and I think that may have had something to do with her certainly understanding the imperative here.
Yeah.
And I had permission to interview them. And I sat for 31 hours interviewing 7 rapists, not just the rapists in this case, but 4 others who I felt I had to practice on. And I felt I had to practice because I've never made a documentary before, I've never interviewed people before, and I needed to be sure that I got really meaningful answers to my questions. And also, when I was 18, I was raped, and I didn't know the degree to which these buried demons might surface.
Right.
I was worried I might actually physically assault one of them with the anger that I have against men who do this to women.
Right, right. But the interviews are staggering because no matter the fact that the one rapist in particular who was involved in and faces capital punishment for the death of Jyoti Singh, although he comes from extremely poor circumstances and migrant camp and ill-educated or poorly or not at all, he nonetheless has an extraordinary sense of male entitlement, that it was her fault, that she might have lived if she hadn't fought back, that any woman who is out at night at all doing wrong things, like going to a film, The Life of Pi, deserves what she gets, etc. And just as the viewer begins to think, well, this is a product of his poor education and his terrible background and so forth, then there are interviews with the defense lawyers of these men.
Correct.
Who are highly educated and who have the same sense of male entitlement. I mean, so your hair is perpetually standing absolutely on end watching this
Correct.
film. But the most moving thing to me about this film are the interviews that you did with Jyoti's parents. The face of the mother, once seen, is something that never leaves one's memory. And the story of that family and what has happened. It's just an extraordinary film about violence against women, and about the possibilities of striking back against that, because it is also about the way that Indian women and men rose up in protest about the government doing so little in terms of rape. And then, of course, the Modi government banned it,
Yes.
the film.
Yes, how misguided and idiotic a move was that.
Really dumb move, yeah. And is it still not showable in India?
Yep, it's still banned. There have been a few heroic young people. A man called Ketan Dixit, who shall remain my hero forever, who actually went and showed it in defiance of the ban and was arrested and imprisoned as a result of that heroism. But it's absolutely naive of the Indian government to think that it can effectively ban a film in a digital era.
Yes.
Within 1 hour of the BBC broadcast of this film, 1.5 million Indians had seen a hacked and leaked version of the film on the internet. Now, I think by this point, anyone in India who has access to the internet has seen this film.
The Modi government has been a problem in so many ways, I mean, the feminist movement in India even took a stand against the death penalty for these men, which is a gesture of enormous high morality, I think, and integrity. Anyway, so the film that exists in the rest of the world, and India has seen it as well. It can't be stopped. You can't not see it. And in the wake of it, there's a new initiative. Tell us briefly about that, Leslie.
So the film, for me, identified the problem. And the problem being that these men who violate women are not rotten apples in a barrel. They are ubiquitous. They exist right across societies, not just in India, but the world.
Yeah.
And the problem is the mindset of gender inequality. That is what leads to all these other symptoms: rape, trafficking, child marriage, female genital mutilation, etc. When you examine what it is we're teaching our children, the children of the world, we are teaching them numeracy and literacy. We are educating their heads, and we are utterly, woefully neglecting the education of their hearts. We are not teaching them respect for another human being, the value of another human being. We're not teaching them empathy, which is such a crucial element in progress.
This is the Equality Studies Global Initiative?
Yes, it is. And essentially, I'm advising the UN Human Rights Office on this initiative. And essentially, what it demands is that we teach our children human rights on a compulsory basis. It should not be left for parents or schools to opt in or out, because the old learners that they are, they will opt out. And if it's compulsory for a child to learn mathematics, it has to be compulsory for a child to learn respect for another human being.
Right.
We're designing and constructing the curriculum starting from next year with a committee of global visionaries and experts in education, human rights, gender, and psychology. And we are going to present the world with 3 curricula: early years, middle years, and senior years, which will then be adapted by the adopting countries, and it will start rolling out in schools across the world in 2018.
People can find out more about the film and where it's playing and how to get it by going to simply India's Daughter, all one word, .com. It's on Facebook as India's Daughter, and also on Twitter. And you can eventually, the initiative, as it develops, they can find out as well online. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And can I just say, on the 8th of March next year, Bianca Jagger and I are calling for a strike of all women and girls across the world. We want every woman and girl who can join this strike for a day to show the world what happens when women down tools, when they no longer stay at home and look after the children. This happened in Iceland some time back, I think in the 60s or 70s, but my God, laws were changed as a result because the whole country came to an absolute shutdown standstill.
Yes. Well, and so if you keep abreast of these developments, listener, start, of course, with India's Daughter, because that's the linchpin, and then stay on the case to find out about the initiative and about the upcoming worldwide demonstration on March 8th. Hopefully there will be a lot of publicity about it so people will be able to join. And Leslie, thank you for this film. Thank you for the staunchness with which you have endured being vilified in various quarters for having done it. And thank you for having persisted, and the extraordinary contribution this is to fighting violence against women.
Robin, I must turn the thanks straight back at you. You have been an extraordinary champion for so many years for women and girls, and we are all grateful to you, and we are carrying this baton and we are carrying this torch together, and we just need so many more women and girls to work with us and join us in this, and we will see the change. It's just over that hill.
It definitely is. And thank you also for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you, Robin.
We have to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with an interview about the newest development coming out of the National Museum of Women in the Arts. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Founded in 1987, the National Museum of Women in the Arts champions women through the arts by collecting, exhibiting, and creating programs that advocate for equity and redefine traditional histories of art. It is the world's only major museum dedicated to celebrating the creative contributions and accomplishments of women in the arts, and it presents work by women from contemporary women all the way back to the 16th century. My next guest is Lorie Mertes, who is the Director of Public Programs, and she's here to talk about a very exciting new initiative. Lorie Mertes, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Robin. I'm thrilled to be here.
The National Museum of Women in the Arts is very dear to my heart. I've been a charter member since the very beginning.
Saw that. Thank you. That's fantastic.
Well, thank you. It's the two beloveds of my life, art and the women's movement and women's rights. So it's a natural for me, and I've stayed consistent as a member over all these years. You, of course, are the Director of Public Programs, and
Yes.
you are the one who's in charge of this wonderful Women, Arts, and Social Change new public program initiative. So, and it's launched just this October. Tell the listeners about it.
Well, sure. So, as you know, as a charter member, this museum opened with the mission to really be an advocate, and this was a very progressive movement in terms of the 1980s, to open a museum 2 blocks from the White House dedicated to women in the arts and telling the story of women in the arts.
In 1987, right?
1987 is when the building opened, and it's a fantastic building that was a Masonic temple originally. In the 1940s, it was a risque blue movie house. So very much a boys' club, and the girls took over in the 1980s under the vision of our founder, Mrs. Wilhelmina Holiday.
It's a gorgeous building. Every time I'm in Washington, I try to make time to go.
So, well, we are turning 30 in a couple of years.
Wow.
2017, and as all almost 30-year-olds do, we sort of have this looking at who we are and what our identity is and what we're putting out in the world and what our contributions are. And the museum is in a really great place stability-wise, financially, amazingly. Through 2008, we were able to get a really fantastic endowment secured. And this is the time to be having this reflection about our relevance in the 21st century. And so that's really what this whole initiative is about, is looking at what's going on in the world around us, looking at this sort of culture of museums, and what is our contribution, being a museum that is cause-driven, as you said, and advocacy is our mission. What is our role in the conversation about women in the arts today? And so how to really be proactive about, and also being in Washington, D.C. We are in the place that is the home of multiple, non-government agencies, policy making industry, and the think tanks that are here. It's a really amazing space to be in as a museum. And how do we really have relevance to the conversation, both in the context of D.C., but also into what's going on the subject of gender parity today?
Wonderful.
And that's the focus. So Women, Arts, and Social Change is this new public program initiative. And we're really looking at the women and their ideas that have the potential for creating change, using the arts and creative thinking, creative ideas, innovation. And we're talking about change that is looking at how the arts can impact, whether it's the environment, social justice issues, gender issues, violence, conflict, health. And really, these are the issues that are shaping our world. And the arts play an important role, as do the women who are coming up with these amazing ideas.
Yeah, it was Shelley, of course. Probably he stole it from Mary Shelley, who said that artists are the unacknowledged legislators of the world.
Art museums are seen as places that are a reflection of our culture, a reflection of society, perhaps a reflection of the city it's in. And, if we go back to our founding mission, if women are not represented on the walls of museum, or if their representations are, as I know you had the Gorilla Girls on recently.
They're old friends, yes.
Yes, so if you have your representation of women is that they're the nudes on the wall as opposed to the artists on the wall,
right,
that's a problem.
Yeah. Tell us about Fresh Talk, which is the signature program of this new initiative.
So Fresh Talk invites women from across a range of disciplines to have a conversation on art, design, gender, equity, as I was saying, the environment, identity, education, health, social, economic opportunity, etc. And it's to bring the potential of art and social activism together to a wider audience so that we can really perhaps be the spark for creating a meaningful dialogue with these ideas that might actually make a difference.
That's wonderful. That's absolutely superb. I mean, the United States is almost alone among highly developed countries in having relatively very little subsidizing of the arts, which of course I'm sure you know.
Yes.
And of course when you look at funding for women's projects in general, it's always much, much lower than that for projects that are run by full human beings who are defined as pale males. So the combination of those two makes it really rough. And to put it on the national agenda as something that is not a side item, but is a real food for the soul and the society. And without the arts, we're really nowhere. We may know what we're fighting against, but we've lost sight of what we're fighting for. Seems, at least to me, crucial.
That's absolutely true. And to be looking at the arts as a potential way to solve some problems that continue to be unsolved. Our director, Susan Fisher-Sterling, was invited to the New Champions meeting in Tianjin under the World Economic Forum. She was the only art museum person invited to this, group of a major business economic forum. And to have an art museum have a chance to talk about the potential of the arts for change, that's fantastic. And that's a small but growing shift. And then you have the combination of this amazing conversation with young feminists, high-profile celebrities.
We're having a hot moment. We're suddenly feminism. We have to make the most of this.
It's not the dirty word anymore.
No, it's not the dirty word anymore.
And how do we take that energy and momentum of these new audiences who are embracing this social goal and mission and demanding gender parity, gender equity across fields, across disciplines?
The museum has always been unusual and ahead of its time in being extremely inclusive. As opposed to many other, in fact, maybe all other museums I could mention. I remember years ago you had a show on Native Americans specifically, but in general, indigenous art by women, and the museum directly engaged this thing that has us all grinding our teeth, which is that, whatever women do is crafts, and when men do it, it's art. So that if it's useless and has no specific use and is abstract and hangs on the wall, that must be by a man. That's worthy of a museum. But if you can use it, if it's a bowl, if it's a weaving, if it's pottery or a basket, and can be used, then it must be somehow of lower value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you mention about some of the more sort of very pioneering shows that happen here, but of course museums don't display their history on the side of the building to get claim for that. We did show artists from the Arab world years ago. We showed the Aboriginal show of women, of painters from the indigenous culture of Australia, and it's amazing some of the things that have been shown here over time. Was there an audience paying attention?
Well,
that's always for any museum, that's always who's listening, who's looking.
I sure was, and
well, we love you for that.
Please give the website of the museum and urge people, as I will continue to do, to
thank you.
Come on board.
I urge you. We have an amazing lineup. We are going to keep this conversation going over the next 5 to 7 years and see where it goes. We're going to really follow up on social media. So #FreshTalk, the number 4 for change. is where we're really inviting people to add their voice to this conversation. And our website is www.nmwa.org.
Wonderful. And thank you. Thank everybody.
Robin, thank you for all that you're doing. I love your program. I love your surreal corner and all of it.
Thank you so much, Lorie.
Thank
Take care.
you, Robin.
And now it's time for a moment's stop in the Surrealism Corner. According to The Count, which is a national survey and report by the Lilly Awards and the Dramatists Guild of America, women wrote, wait for it, 26% of plays and 12% of musicals produced in this country over 3 seasons from 2011-12 to 2013-14. It breaks down as the number of produced plays nationally written by women is 22% on average. That's the crazy, insane surrealism part. The good news, however, is that plays by women are now out in force during the currently taking place Women's Voices Theater Festival, with 51 participating theaters in the Washington, D.C. area. They're going to stage 56 world premiere productions by 58 female playwrights. This is indeed very good news for the theater, as well as for female people and for male people who like good theater. So 7 Washington area companies have banded together to spearhead this venture, and it's the hope that it will grow and proliferate throughout the country. This festival will continue through the end of November, and you can find out more about this festival and hopefully plans for more such festivals in the future at the website womensvoicestheaterfestival.org. It's time for another short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I thought I knew what revenge porn was. Did you think you knew? Well, it turns out much more toxic than I had imagined. My next guest is an expert in it, so she'll be with us right after the break.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. My next guest, Dr. Mary Ann Franks, is a professor of law at the University of Miami School of Law, where she teaches criminal law, criminal procedure, First Amendment law, and family law. She's also the legislative and tech policy director and vice president of the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to challenging online harassment and abuse. And here she is in all her wisdom and scholarship and splendor, Mary Ann Franks. Welcome to the program, Dr. Franks. Mary Ann, if I may. Good to have you here.
It's really an honor to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I thought I knew what revenge porn was. I thought, well, it's when a jilted guy or some guy who's pissed off for some reason, basic sexism, whatever, decides to publish online compromising photos of his former girlfriend, sometimes with her name and address. But it's much more than that, I gather, having begun to do my homework about your extraordinary work. So tell us your definition, which is deeper and broader and more toxic, of revenge porn.
Well, the term revenge porn is a misleading one in some ways because it does imply that the motive for someone to engage in this type of behavior is revenge for the end of a relationship or for not pursuing a relationship. Mm-hmm. And as you say, that in many of these cases, that is exactly what happens. But I prefer the term non-consensual pornography because it puts more of the emphasis on the fact that these images, sexually explicit images, are distributed in whatever form without a person's consent. And that can be from an ex-partner, but it can also be, for instance, in the case of the recent celebrity hacking, it can be a stranger who just finds it entertaining to take women's intimate photos and make them publicly available. In many cases, we've seen recordings of sexual assaults that people have decided to publicize for entertainment purposes. So it is beyond just the context of the intimate partner or former partner who's seeking some kind of retaliation. It can be much broader than that. But the basic definition is the non-consensual distribution of sexually explicit images.
I was astonished to learn that copyright law can't protect, it can't help the victim, the survivor, if the person who publishes the image also made it. So if he takes a photograph of you when you're when the relationship is in a good state, or for that matter, if he doesn't even know you, but he takes, as you just said, a picture of you and publishes it, as long as he was the one who took the picture, there's nothing you can do?
That's right. With regard to copyright specifically as a solution, copyright is something that the creator of the image holds. And so even if we're talking about some of the worst cases, which are sexual assaults that someone has photographed, that person who stands on the sidelines and takes a picture of a rape and publishes it, he actually owns the copyright in that image. And she has nothing to say about it. So copyright is a very limited remedy for those people who have taken pictures of themselves, and in those cases they may be able to find some relief. So it will assist some victims, but even in those contexts, the need to resort to copyright is already sort of an admission of defeat, that we don't have a better way to conceptualize women's sexual autonomy than to say they have a property interest in their image. So it's a bit of a limited view.
So what can we do? I mean, I know that you're working on policy and possibly legislation and so forth. Many different. This is going to take all of us to get this changed. The Women's Media Center Speech Project which is new, is going to be using the Women's Media Center's journalism and activism platforms to document online abuse and suppression of women's free speech, because of course that's one of the effects of this, and to create new laws and policies to try to stop this constant toxic online abuse. But I know some countries have outlawed this non-consensual publishing of images, among them Israel, Germany, the United Kingdom, 23 states in the U.S., but that's still pretty small. On what grounds can it be made illegal, and why can't we do that more?
Well, we've actually had considerable success in a fairly short amount of time. Before 2011, before the organization that I work with, which is called the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, before it was created, there were only 3 states in the United States that had laws against this conduct. And now we're actually up at 26, and also Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And I've been working with members of Congress on a federal bill that's due to be introduced very soon. So we've made a lot of progress in a short amount of time, but one of the major obstacles, or I should back up and I should say, not having an explicit law against non-consensual pornography doesn't mean that there aren't other methods of recourse. But if we're talking about a phenomenon that can't really be taken back once it's been committed,
right,
the emphasis really has to be on deterring it before it happens, because no matter what the legal or other solution after the fact, the person who is victimized in this way can never recover what has been exposed to the public that she had intended to keep private. So our emphasis at the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative and in my work has been to focus on 3 different areas. One is legislative reform. The other is technological reform, that is to say, getting social media and other tech companies to do their part to try to prevent this material from either emerging in the first place, or at least to take it down as quickly as they can afterwards. Mm-hmm. And then a general education type of approach, which is to encourage people, this will be no news to you, but to encourage people to think of women's bodies not as public property, but as but to think of women as equal human beings and to not engage in this type of behavior. So it's a difficult task, right?
What a concept, Marianne.
Right. So we're trying very hard to move those norms, because we're talking about a situation which we shouldn't be in this situation, and this especially in this day and age that we're having to argue with people about whether they have the right to publish naked pictures of women without their consent it's a frustrating and depressing thing to have to talk about. And given the kind of extortionate nature of many of these photos, when you mentioned silencing women, what we see is that very often the threat of exposing these photos keeps women not only literally trapped in abusive relationships, but also keeps them from getting a divorce. It keeps them from obtaining custody of their children. It keeps them from doing any number of things that might be healthy and right for them to do because of the threat that these pictures might make it into the public sphere. So women are really being forced in many ways to constrain their lives, to constrain their careers, to constrain their choices based on the fear that this might happen to them.
My God, this gives new meaning and hideous meaning to the phrase "the male gaze," doesn't it?
It really does, because we've seen that even though we do have instances of male victims as well, the consequences for female victims of this is particularly devastating, because we do live in a culture that punishes women at the same time that it encourages women and sort of forces them in many ways to become exhibitionists. But the moment that is done, our society has a tendency to judge women for ever having been naked or ever having sex. And so the consequences of visual records of a woman having a body and visual records of a woman maybe even enjoying sex seems to be something that many employers can't handle, many school environments can't seem to handle, and therefore the women suffer extraordinary negative consequences for the fact that these images have been released.
You also co-produced the documentary Hot Girls Wanted, I know, which examined the so-called professional amateur porn industry. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the documentary focuses primarily on Miami, so this is where I'm based at the moment. And yes, as this term, professional amateur pornography, which is a bit of a strange concept in itself, but basically the idea is it's pornography that is professionally produced but made to look as though it's not, because that seems to be something that consumers really want. They want to believe that it is in fact the girl next door who just so happens to be in an awkward situation with her father's friend or something along those lines. And what the film focuses on is on the fact that these are women. And the term women, I mean, these are women who have turned 18 maybe the day of that we're talking about. So we're really talking about quite young women in these circumstances, that they are consenting in a nominal sense to the production of these types of films and these types of videos, but the extent of the coercion and the abuse that they experience as a matter of course is something that I think people are not necessarily aware of. Yeah. We have many people, especially on the left, who are quite educated and concerned about labor conditions and about the conditions of production for T-shirts, but not so much about the production of pornography and what actually goes on behind the scenes in terms of coercion, exploitation, physical abuse. And I think the film does a very good job of trying to present this just as the reality of what goes on for at least some portion of this industry, that it is quite disturbing just from the perspective of exploitation, of the fact that these are really horrific labor conditions that we would probably not accept if it were any other product than sex.
Yeah, when it gets to sexual politics, specifically per se, pornography, prostitution, trafficking, you always lose the left because they go toward a libertarian position, and their consciousness on women is still not where it should be. On the other hand, bizarrely enough, you gain the right in support, but for the wrong reasons.
Right.
They're not against sexism; they're just against sex. So
exactly.
So women stand alone on all of those issues, which are the core issues that underlie all of the other ones. My God, what a coil! If you haven't seen, listeners, Hot Girls Wanted, seek it out. In fact, Marianne, tell people how they can find it, and also please give the website of Cyber Civil Rights Initiative.
Yes, so with regard to Hot Girls Wanted, you can get that on Netflix, and there is, for the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, I want to make sure I get this right, I believe it's cybercivilrights.org.
cybercivilrights.org. Well, the work is extremely important. It overlaps with cyber stalking. It overlaps with everyday sexism that's around us all the time, but it is also a real cutting edge thereby. Thank you so much for the work you do, scholarly and activist. Hell of a good combination. And please come back and talk to us again, okay?
I would be very happy to do so. Thank you.
It's time for one last pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will be right back, you bet, with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again, just in time for some fighting words. I would really like to know why the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, seems to think that it can experiment on women's bodies and not regulate and doing its own job of regulation, because if it has to do with women's reproductive systems, oh, you know, what the hell. It's just happening again. Okay, let me take this case by case. The current scandal is about the device known as Essure, E-S-S-U-R-E, that's implanted in a woman's fallopian tubes to induce scar tissue formation, to block the tubes and prevent eggs from being fertilized. It's an alternative to procedures that tie or cut fallopian tubes, and some 750,000 women have received the device around the world, mostly in the USA. More than 5,000 women have reported harmful effects to the FDA, and this is probably an undercount by grave measures, since many problems go unreported. But according to the advisory committee of the FDA's summary, patients have reported persistent pain, bleeding, allergic reactions because it has nickel in it. The device is part nickel, and people have nickel reactions. And also people have experienced the need to remove a faulty device and repair any damage, but the inability of most OBGYNs to remove it. There have also, guess what, been hundreds of unwanted pregnancies, and the risks of removal are not known because various techniques have not been evaluated in clinical studies. In addition to these complaints, a petition has been submitted to the FDA by a Florida law firm that claims that the small company that developed the device committed fraud by manipulating data in the clinical trials that led to the FDA's approval. And the FDA sent the complaint to its compliance office, which is just simply not sufficient. The charges need to be investigated by an independent office free of FDA influence. The manufacturer, Bayer Healthcare Pharmaceuticals, which acquired the device in 2013, argues that the percentage of women reporting the problems is low, and many of the problems probably are unrelated to the device. The problems women have told of autoimmune problems like eczema, lupus, celiac disease, of cysts, of abscesses and tumors, of severe fatigue, of losing bowel control, and of many schleppings through the healthcare system in search of a diagnosis. Perhaps the most troubling was an account by a woman named Gabriella Avina, who said she had taken part in the original clinical trials and had worked for the company, for Bayer Pharmaceutical, explaining the device to women when it first came on the market. And she said, in testifying before the FDA, "I am here today, almost 13 plus years later, to say I was wrong. Time has changed my thoughts, beliefs, and most importantly, my health." She has had many health problems with this, too many to list here, that began to lift when she finally had the device removed. This device was approved by the FDA 13 years ago after, guess what, a fast-track review process that prioritized the device because it was the first alternative at that point to surgical sterilization, and it promised a quick recovery. This is just appalling. Diane Zuckerman, the president of the National Center for Health Research, which has been tracking the device, said that some women participating in the clinical trials had evidence that their answers were changed by clinical investigators to make their response seem rosier, an accusation that, of course, Bayer denied. But this is not the first time that the FDA has gone on fast-track review and approved something too early and without sufficient rigor of examination. The birth control pill itself was tested on Puerto Rican women for a long time in the island of Puerto Rico, resulting in sterilizations, resulting in miscarriages, resulting in deaths in a couple of cases, and tremendous health problems. And some of these women were tested without being told they were being tested. The same thing I might add happened with thalidomide, which was prescribed as a drug for morning sickness to pregnant women. And it was one courageous woman at the FDA, when the FDA was rushing to confirm it and release it and approve it, who said, wait, there are studies coming in from Europe that seem to say that the children born of women who take thalidomide are born disabled with no arms or with flippers for arms. So she alone threw herself in the way of thalidomide being rapidly approved in the United States. And now we have yet another one. I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again. It's the so-called Viagra for Women drug, which was backed by an FDA panel after an intense lobbying campaign, which was incredibly cynical because it positioned the drug as being a feminist drug. This drug, unlike Viagra, which actually works on erectile tissue, this drug does not. This drug works on the brain, folks. It was rejected twice by the FDA. The first time in 2010 came after a similar advisory committee voted unanimously against approval. The same drug company, Sprout Pharmaceuticals, has had lawsuits and difficulties with other drugs, including a contraceptive for men, that they've issued before. So, this makes you crazy. Susan Scanlon, who is the chairwoman of the Even the Score Coalition, which was built by Sprout Pharmaceuticals, hailed the vote and said, "Today we write a new chapter in the fight for equity in sexual health, and it's a good thing for women." But the drug works by influencing chemicals in the brain, such as serotonin and dopamine. And 3 clinical trials testing the drug, flibanserine, were consistent in their results, that this is not a good thing to take. So we've done it with Assure, we've done it with thalidomide, we've done it with the birth control pill itself, and now we're doing it again in terms of Even the Score and flibanserine and Sprout Pharmaceuticals. If it's just women, hey, what the hell, approve it. We'll see how it shakes out, and if we have to withdraw the approval, well, we'll do that later on. And if various people have become very ill or died, them's the breaks. It's time to stop experimenting on women's bodies, folks. It's time to act like the FDA. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com. There you can find the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. And we're at iTunes worldwide. There you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Regina K. Scully is our founding sponsor. Julie Burton, Women's Media Center President, is executive producer. And I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.